Have you ever felt that what you learned in school, despite all the facts and figures, somehow missed some of the most important lessons for, real life?
Hmm.
Or maybe that you were taught what to think, but not truly how to think for yourself, especially about the big, thorny issues?
It's a really powerful question, isn't it? And one that I think gets right to the core of what education could be.
Yeah.
It points to that gap so many of us have felt, whether we're still in school or like years out.
Absolutely. And today we're taking a deep dive into exactly that feeling. We're guided by Critical Lessons, What Our Schools Should Teach,
Mm.
by Noddings, which came out in 2006.
Right. And Noddings, she's not coming at this from an ivory tower, is she?
Not at all. She spent 15 years as a public school teacher, an administrator, a curriculum developer, and she even got Stanford's award for teaching excellence 3 times. So her perspective is incredibly grounded.
Yeah, that background is key. It lets her argue for what might seem like a radical shift,
hmm
but one that feels incredibly essential,
So our mission with this deep dive is to unpack Nodding's core argument.
which is basically that critical, reflective thinking on controversial, real-world issues is absolutely vital. Vital for students to understand themselves, all the forces shaping them.
And ultimately to thrive in a liberal democracy.
Right, exactly. We'll explore why she thinks these critical lessons are so often neglected and, what surprising insights pop up when we actually dare to discuss them.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Nodding's central premise about critical thinking and self-understanding. She really pulls on that ancient Socratic advice. Know thyself.
Mm-hmm. Fundamental for living what Socrates called an examined life.
But it's not just about pure logic or cold reason, is it? That's not what she means by critical thinking.
Not at all. Noddings, much like the philosopher David Hume, actually, she highlights that while humans are largely driven by emotion, reason has this crucial role in examining those emotions.
Yeah, okay.
It's not about being told not to feel a certain way, but more like asking ourselves, okay, why am I feeling this way? What's really behind this reaction?
So critical thinking is a broader thing. It's a reflective, almost compassionate look at our whole inner landscape, feelings included.
Exactly, and that ties directly into how we learn and what motivates us way beyond just chasing grades.
Right. She argues that conventional schooling often misses crucial parts of learning because it relies too heavily on those external motivators.
Indeed. Noddings outlines two main theories of motivation. Theory one, that's the one that champions intrinsic motivation, natural impulse. The idea that people learn best when they're genuinely curious, driven from within.
Like, who would fit there?
Well, think of someone like Ivan Illich, right? In deschooling society, he argued, people are naturally motivated to seek out knowledge, find mentors on their own.
Okay.
Or A.S. Neal, who ran the famous free school Summerhill, letting kids choose what to learn. Even Abraham Maslow's humanistic psychology, self-actualization, peak experiences, it all leans into this idea of internal drive.
And then theory 2 is the opposite.
Pretty much. Theory 2 says external motivation rewards. Basically, that's what's really needed. That's where you get B.F. Skinner's behaviorism, focused on how rewards and punishments shape our actions.
So it makes you wonder, could that constant push for top grades actually reduce the intrinsic motivation Noddings is talking about? Could it backfire?
It's a really compelling question. And Nodding suggests a pretty radical approach for teachers here. She advises them to tell students basically, look, it's okay not to like math. I'll help you all I can. You have my sympathy. Just do an adequate job.
Just adequate, not do your best.
Right? The takeaway is that the goal isn't always do your best in everything. It's about doing an adequate job on what's required and then saving your real energy, your passion, for what truly ignites you.
Huh. That respect for their genuine interests, maybe that actually makes them more willing to engage overall.
That's the idea. Ironically, yeah.
That's fascinating. It sounds like she's advocating for a deeply personal approach to learning, and part of that is understanding how we uniquely process information, right? Even in our downtime.
Exactly. She challenges our typical view of daydreaming, suggests it's not just escapism, but potentially a powerful source of productive thinking.
She shares some great stories about this, doesn't she?
Yeah, like Mozart describing compositions just being dictated to him on quiet walks, like they were already complete in his mind.
Wow.
Or the mathematician Henri Poincaré, who famously had those aha moments, like stepping onto a bus after struggling with the problem for ages.
Right, but these aren't just random flashes, are they? They usually come after a lot of focused effort.
Precisely. There's often that intense prior work, then maybe a break, letting the subconscious chew on it. And sometimes, she says, the best thing you can do is to just stop thinking and just look at a problem.
To avoid getting stuck in a rut.
Exactly. To avoid what she calls perseveration, that mental trap where you just keep rigidly applying the same method over and over, even when it's clearly not working.
So understanding your own rhythms of focus and like diffuse thinking that can really improve how you study or work.
Definitely. It's a key part of self-knowledge for learning.
Okay, now, moving from understanding ourselves, Noddings really pushes us to confront some truly difficult truths, things our schools often shy away from.
Yes, and the first major one she tackles is, well, the psychology of war.
Why should high schools address that? Especially, she notes, for non-college bound kids who might actually join the military.
Well, it's not just about the potential physical harm. It's something much deeper. She talks about the potential soul-destroying effects of war.
The loss of moral identity in combat.
Right. She cites this chilling quote from a soldier who killed children, asking, "Why? Why did I do that? That is not me."
It's such a profound question. How do otherwise good people do terrible things? And how do others, the heroes maybe, avoid that moral degeneration?
It really is. And you have writers like J.G. Gray talking about the enduring appeals of battle, even the delight of destruction, which is such a stark contrast to someone like William James, who was desperately searching for a moral equivalent of war.
He was horrified by war, but also worried it was the only thing preventing effeminacy. That's a complicated thought.
Very. It suggests this deep-seated societal need or perceived need for something that really tests the human spirit in that way.
And exploring pacifism is crucial here too, right? Its arguments, its practicality.
Yeah, the different historical variations, groups like the Quakers, the Mennonites, or individuals refusing to pay war taxes.
And students should know about Jeanette Rankin, first woman in Congress, voted against both world wars.
Yeah, her brave consistency, as Noddings puts it, especially when you contrast it with someone like Woodrow Wilson, who shifted his stance after campaigning against entering WWI.
It also means taking a critical look at the public psyche, how attitudes towards soldiers and war can be so fickle.
From just tolerance to, fervent hero worship, and the shocking ease with which hatred can be whipped up.
Like the WWI propaganda against Germans or the Japanese-American internment in WWII.
Exactly. The chilling insight there is how easily people can just abdicate their moral judgment when pressured to follow the crowd. Critical thinking becomes a defense against that kind of psychological surrender.
And how some people, like the Nazi official Albert Speer, actually found it a relief not to think. Just follow orders, give up responsibility.
Yeah, and community pressure silencing dissent. Primo Levi's observation about torturers is especially chilling, describing them as just average human beings, reared badly by miseducation.
Wow. Underscores the huge role education plays, or fails to play, in shaping moral individuals.
So, from the huge scope of war, Noddings brings us right down to something that seems maybe mundane by comparison, but is just as fundamental: the meaning of home in everyday life.
Right. She challenges the idea that critical thinking doesn't apply to homemaking.
Even though it's rarely a serious subject in schools, despite the fact that everyone, makes a home of some sort.
She wants us to ask things like, what does my house or my room say about me? Or what attitude should I take toward my possessions?
Yeah, she brings in Gaston Bachelard's The Poetics of Space, The House Shelters Daydreaming, The House Protects the Dreamer. It invites this critical reflection on how our living spaces actually support our inner lives, influence our sense of self.
And she connects this even to environmental issues, the lawn.
Right. The lawn as this totally unexamined feature of modern life. There are solid ecological reasons to reduce lawns' water use, biodiversity, but there's often this huge social pressure for that perfect, well-clipped lawn.
It's wild to think how much of daily life, even a lawn, is shaped by these subtle pressures. Makes you wonder what else we're just accepting without thinking.
It really does. And she points out how physical building forms evolve with customs, religion, technology. Martin Heidegger, while he got criticized for overlooking actual physical homelessness, he did pose that deep philosophical question about the real plight of dwelling. How do we truly belong, feel at home in the world?
And Noddings reminds us that a home isn't just a house. It could be a trailer, an apartment.
A school, a church, a library.
Yeah. And people feel strong attachments to natural features, symbolic places. She mentions Elie Wiesel saying he felt most at home in Jerusalem when I am not in Jerusalem. That deep, almost paradoxical connection.
Okay, let's shift now to maybe one of the most fundamental areas.
Yeah.
Our relations with other people. Noddings highlights this paradox, right? We desperately need one another, but we also experience fear, jealousy, hate.
She traces reciprocity right back to infancy, drawing on Martin Buber's idea that all actual life is encounter, the importance of genuine dialogue.
hmm And this includes understanding all those unspoken, tacit rules of everyday behavior. Eating manners, whether you can sing in public, how customs provide structure, but also subtly constrain us.
And those customs can become really problematic. She uses that striking example, standing for the national anthem during the Vietnam War. Was it genuine respect or just fear of judgment?
It's a great way to make abstract social pressure feel incredibly concrete, yeah.
And Buber's concept of confirmation comes in here.
Yes, as a key part of moral education, it's about trying to attribute the best possible motive consonant with reality to someone else's questionable action.
That sounds hard.
It is. It requires moral interdependence. Noddings argues this actually challenges Kant's idea of achieving individual moral perfection in isolation.
So it's about connection.
Yeah. Deep connection. And it powerfully underscores how important listening is as a moral act. She notes that a lack of acceptance is a cause of antisocial behavior and violence in adolescence. To genuinely listen is really to affirm someone's existence.
Okay, shifting gears into what Noddings calls the modern minefield. First up, advertising and propaganda.
Right. She introduces this idea of a consumer's republic, where maybe our citizenship is being subtly redefined more by what we buy than by civic action.
She cites Simon Patton, who observed something like, to have a high standard of life means to enjoy a pleasure intensely and tire of it quickly.
Yeah, that relentless cycle. And advertising, Noddings notes, manipulates us often without even needing us to believe the claims. It just uses pictures, catchy phrases, celebrities.
Like cars advertised with beautiful women or images of speed. The connection is purely emotional, not logical.
Exactly. And historically, when consumer protection movements popped up, she knows how business struck back by linking consumer advocacy to being anti-American, subversive, even communist.
Right.
It's a classic tactic frame social issues as political threats to protect economic interests.
We see that with health advertising, too. The Vioxx recall is a big example she uses. Merck's painkiller linked to heart attacks and strokes after initial assurances.
And Noddings observes that the American public seems convinced there is a drug for every ailment and complaint, which creates this odd paradox with illicit drug use, where maybe similar motivations exist, but one is legal and encouraged, the other criminalized.
Political propaganda, too. Like the Swift boat ads against John Kerry in 2004, designed to make you believe something without really checking.
Right. And the difficult concept of noble lies where governments might spin or withhold information supposedly to preserve social stability raises huge ethical questions about transparency, obviously.
And this manipulation even comes back to our lawns.
It does. Open, manicured lawns were actually promoted as being Christian and democratic, compared to, say, traditional walled gardens.
Yeah.
It basically forced conformity on homeowners. It's social pressure disguised as aesthetics or values.
So Noddings poses this really provocative question for us.
Yeah. What if we all just ignored most advertising? Would our economy actually collapse? And what does that tell us about the path we're on as a society?
It really highlights how deeply embedded consumption is in our whole way of life.
Absolutely. Foundational, almost.
Okay, next up in the minefield. Making a living and ethical choices. She points out what she calls the hypocrisy of schooling here.
Pushing often unrealistic job expectations, like that common claim, which is often false, that most jobs will require higher education.
Right. And for many kids, just navigating poverty and having few role models for work is a huge struggle.
It's a crucial point. Noddings wants students to think critically about the ethics of different jobs. Should you work growing tobacco, logging old forests, advertising harmful products?
She even says we should consider making allowances for the poppy growers of Afghanistan. That's complex.
It is. It reminds us that some labor is just backbreaking, smelly, and unhealthy, which contrasts sharply with that romanticized idea of the dignity of all labor. Her insight is that all work isn't equal, ethically speaking, and students need to grapple with that.
She even brings up utopian ideas again, like Edward Bellamy's Looking Backward, where undesirable jobs like housework are shared.
Yeah, it challenges our basic assumptions about what work is, who does it, and what its real value is.
So her guiding question for students isn't just, what job can I get?
No, it's much deeper. What sort of occupation will permit me to become the person I want to be, and live the life I envision.
That shifts the focus completely from just finding a job to finding a livelihood that actually aligns with your values, your personal growth.
Exactly. A career is part of self-actualization.
And speaking of personal development, gender is another area she says needs critical lessons. And these aren't just abstract academic issues.
No, they're deeply personal, critical for individuals. She points out this conflict. Should women become more self-promoting, like men often are encouraged to be? Or should men maybe become less self-interested, embrace more communal values?
And the stats she uses are stark. Despite academic success, women still dominate caring professions. What was it? 91% of nurses, 98% of childcare workers back in 2001.
Right. And they're often told, oh, you're too smart for that,
Yeah.
which inadvertently devalues these absolutely essential but still female-dominated fields.
She also mentions that painful historical idea, the variability hypothesis.
Ugh, yes. The idea that women were just inherently less variable intellectually, meaning fewer geniuses and fewer idiots,
Yeah.
basically suggesting overall inferiority. She cites the despair of the scientist Mary Somerville, writing, "No genius, that spark from heaven, is not granted to the sex."
It just shows how deeply ingrained these damaging biases can be.
And the gender bias extends sharply to homosexual orientation. Noddings identifies what she calls a warped form of religious devotion as a prime suspect in supporting hatred.
That raises a really difficult question schools often avoid.
It does. If religious conviction sometimes inspires hatred, doesn't it also often counsel hate the sin but love the sinner? And more importantly, what does it do to a person, especially a kid, to be told their very identity is sinful?
These are vital, complex discussions that demand critical reflection, not easy answers.
Absolutely not.
Which leads us naturally into the last part of this minefield,
Yeah.
religion and the late grid.
Yeah. Noddings acknowledges that most Americans, including adolescents, say they have strong beliefs in God. But she also points out what she calls conceptual confusion.
Like believing God is always watching, but then daily conduct doesn't always seem to reflect that.
Right, that disconnect. She briefly touches on the classic philosophical proofs for God's existence: ontological, cosmological, teleological.
Can you quickly recap those?
Sure, ontological tries to prove God from the very concept of a perfect being. Cosmological argues from the need for a first cause for the universe. Teleological argues from the appearance of design in nature. But, Noddings notes, most philosophers today, following thinkers like Kant and Hume, generally see these as logically flawed, as hopeless for proving God's existence purely through reason.
But that doesn't disprove God either, right?
Exactly. It doesn't disprove God under some other definition or through faith. It just means those specific logical arguments don't quite hold up for many thinkers.
And what about creation science or intelligent design versus evolution?
Noddings notes that, well, the vast majority of scientists reject creationism and ID as unscientific because they invoke supernatural causes, which science generally doesn't do. But, importantly, many scientists do still believe in God. The issue is really about the boundary between science and faith.
A central philosophical challenge here is the problem of evil, theodicy.
How can suffering and natural disasters exist if God is supposedly all good, all-knowing, and all-powerful? It's a profound theological and philosophical question.
And Noddings directly challenges the concept of hell.
She does, quite forcefully. She says one has to have a cruel heart or a twisted mind to believe that unbelievers, heretics, unbaptized adolescents, women who have had abortions, active homosexuals, and Adolf Hitler all belong together in hell.
That's a very provocative statement, really questions the ethics of some traditional doctrines.
Definitely. She also looks at myths, particularly Adam and Eve. She argues its greatness isn't in its factual history, but in its meaning beyond history.
As a powerful story about the origin of evil or human nature.
Right. But she also discusses feminist interpretations, where the serpent isn't just temptation, but maybe a feminine icon, a symbol of renewal, knowledge, healing, offers a totally different lens.
So where does morality come from then? Is it just God?
Or is it human interdependence, self-interest, basic fellow feeling? Noddings explores these different sources, and she highlights that growing trend of people identifying as spiritual but not religious.
Finding that longing for the sacred outside traditional structures.
Exactly. Finding it in nature or everyday life. Echoing Emerson seeing miracles in the blowing clover and the fallen rain.
Okay, so after walking us through all these critical, often difficult areas, what does this mean for our schools? Her final part is a call to action.
Yeah, preparing our schools. And Noddings is blunt. The current school curriculum, she says, is obsolete, dangerously so.
Strong words. So what's the alternative?
She argues that planning for every single course, academic, vocational, general, doesn't matter.
Hmm.
It should explicitly connect to everyday life, personal growth and meaning, other school subjects, and spiritual questions.
That sounds like a massive overhaul, not just tweaking.
It is. It requires removing a lot of what she frankly calls junk from the curriculum stuff that doesn't serve these core humanistic goals.
And it requires a truly interdisciplinary approach, right? No more silos.
Absolutely. She gives that frustrating example of science teachers saying they can't teach science without the necessary math, but then refusing to teach the math themselves, just expecting another department to handle it.
Yeah, that happens.
Noddings calls for a humanistic focus that values both academic and vocational education. The aim is developing fully human beings, not just churning out productive workers.
It's a really comprehensive, holistic vision for education, isn't it? Preparing students not just for careers, but for thoughtful, ethical lives, lives where they can engage with the deepest questions.
That's the core of it.
And that really brings us back full circle, back to our mission for this deep dive. We've journeyed through Nell Noddings' radical yet somehow profoundly practical vision.
Yeah, seeing how critical thinking can light up everything from our own study habits to global conflicts, from how we arrange our homes to our deepest beliefs about the sacred.
And this deep dive, it isn't just about what schools should teach, is it? It's about what you, the listener, can continue to learn and reflect on in your own life.
It's about recognizing those often hidden forces that shape our beliefs, our actions, and discovering the power that comes from thoughtful, nuanced engagement with really complex issues. It's about becoming maybe a more aware, more engaged version of yourself.
Noddings asks us to find the courage to take risks, to look into the future, and to imagine a world that could be as opposed to simply what is.
A powerful call.
So, as you go about your day, maybe consider this. What unexamined belief, what accepted custom, or what widely held assumption might you bring a critical, reflective eye to, starting right now?